Succession is a predictable change in a vegetation community over time. Ecological successions are made up of several communities. Several intermediate plant communities from pioneer to climax, which could include hydrospheres, halospheres, lithospheres, xerospheres, etc.
A primary succession is a big damage that makes all organisms matters to disappear. It can also be called as apocalyptic, and it occurs in areas that have only been occupied by an ecological community. A secondary succession is when a minor disturbance happens to the soil already formed and to more organisms. The stages of succession start with stage number 0, which is called the inorganic phase. This stage can only happen to primary succession because this primary succession causes all organic matter to disappear. So the inorganic phase starts with a bare rock surface with a harsh and variable, and the water supply is unreliable. The next step is step number 1, which is colonization, which pioneers species that are adapted to the extreme conditions find enough nutrients with the environment to kickstart. So this means only invertebrates take part of the ecosystem. The next phase is number 2, establishment. It's when humus and organic matters are available to the soil, and it improves all conditions of the environment. The next is number 3, competition. It's when complex larger plants invade the area and compete to the original species. Number 4 is stabilize, which means that fewer new species enter the ecosystem. The food webs are formed and the ecological niche is developed. The last one is climax opportunity number 5. It's when a steady state equilibrium is made with the climate or the soil.
One example in real life of primary succession could be the asteroid that impacted the Earth 65 million years ago. The asteroid was about 10 kilometers in diameter, and it hit the Earth and caused a huge explosion and a crater that was about 180 kilometers in diameter. The climate was severely altered, which led to the extinction of 3/4 of the species that existed at the time. Eventually, Earth's conditions improved and the environment was kick-started. These developments led to Earth as it is today. Obviously, it took a lot of time and hundreds of years for that to happen. A real-life example of the secondary succession could be Chipinca's forest fire in Monterrey in 1988. The fire was caused by a person who was walking by in the forest, and it was 19 years ago, and it had negative effects in the ecosystem. Even after all these years, many of the species weren't restored, but the progress is much faster than primary succession, which usually takes hundreds of years. Even right now, we can see that Chipinque is restored. Practically, you can't tell there was a forest fire 19 years ago. So this is an example of secondary succession because you can see that it takes way less time than primary succession, which starts from bare rock.
A pioneer community is the first biotic community to develop in a bare area, where it develops soil. Because it was a bare area, it is very hostile, and organisms usually have a short lifespan because of that. It is later replaced by an intermediate community. Intermediate communities, also known as serial communities, are identified when a pioneer community goes through succession and is in that middle point in which it isn't yet a climax community. These have simple food webs, which pioneer communities don't, and food chains. Still, their diversity is of lower degree than a climax community. Climax community is a final community that will develop in an area at the very end of biotic succession. The levels of biomass here are very high, as is their diversity, and the food webs and food chains are much more complex. This also has the highest level of nutrient conservation. Gross productivity is at low levels at the beginning of succession, but as soil becomes more structured, it increases. While net productivity and diversity stabilize as food webs become more structured when the ecosystem reaches climax population.